What happens when absolute power falls into the hands of men consumed not by wisdom, but by madness, paranoia, and cruelty? Imagine a city that once stood as the heart of civilization, Rome, the eternal empire that built aqueducts, roads, and monuments that still tower over us today. But behind the marble facades, beyond the glory of legions marching under the golden eagle, Rome was also a stage where emperors, some brilliant, others monstrous, acted out some of the darkest dramas in human history. We often think of emperors as gods among men, rulers whose words shaped the fate of millions. Yet history whispers a different tale of rulers who bathed in excess, indulged in unspeakable cruelty, and left behind legacies stained with blood. From Nero, who allegedly set his city ablaze while strumming a lyre, to Caligula, whose reign blurred the line between divine ambition and deranged tyranny, the emperors of Rome revealed the terrifying extremes of human nature. But here is the deeper mystery. Were these rulers simply products of power gone wrong, or do they reveal something timeless about the human mind itself? Archaeology and ancient texts give us clues: fragments of marble busts, graffiti scrawled on walls, forgotten coins pressed with the faces of madmen who once thought themselves gods. These relics are not just echoes of an empire, they are windows into our own nature, into the fragile balance between order and chaos. Tonight, we journey into the shadows of Rome to uncover the darkest secrets of its most twisted emperors. What we discover will not only tell us about Rome's past, it may force us to confront unsettling truths about power, corruption, and the very evolution of human civilization itself. To understand the darkest secrets of Rome's twisted emperors, we must first step back into the world they ruled. Imagine standing in the Forum Romanum 2,000 years ago, the beating heart of the empire. Marble temples glisten under the Mediterranean sun, senators in white togas move like shadows of tradition, and the air hums with the clamor of merchants, philosophers, and legionaries returning from distant wars. Rome was not just a city, it was the center of a vast organism stretching from Britain to Mesopotamia, from the icy frontiers of the Rhine to the deserts of Egypt. This empire, however, was fragile. Its strength lay not only in legions and stone, but in the persona of its rulers. The emperor, Caesar, Augustus, Imperator, was both mortal and divine, a single man entrusted with the destiny of millions. The Roman political system had evolved from republic to autocracy, and in this transition, the very structure of power created opportunities for greatness or catastrophe. The archaeological backdrop. Our understanding of Rome's emperors does not rest solely on ancient texts like Suetonius' The 12 Caesars or Tacitus's Annals. Archaeology provides a silent but powerful witness. Coins minted with the faces of emperors tell us how they wanted to be remembered. Augustus depicted as eternally youthful, Nero crowned with laurels, Commodus dressed as Hercules himself. Graffiti scratched into the walls of Pompeii reveals the whispers of ordinary Romans, mocking leaders, cursing officials, or praying for protection. The ruins of palaces also speak volumes. The Domus Aurea, Nero's golden house, sprawled across Rome in gilded extravagance, its walls once covered with jewel-like frescoes. Archaeologists crawling through its dark tunnels today find traces of rooms designed to astonish and overwhelm, a vision of luxury that was as political as it was personal. Similarly, the Colosseum, commissioned by Emperor Vespasian and completed by his son Titus, remains a monumental reminder of how spectacle, blood, and power intertwined. Madness or political strategy. But when ancient sources describe emperors as insane, Caligula declaring himself a god, Nero murdering his own mother, Commodus fighting gladiators in the arena, historians ask, were these accounts exaggerated propaganda?
After all, most surviving records were written by senators, many of whom despised the emperors. Archaeology helps separate myth from reality. Inscriptions, statues, and surviving infrastructure remind us that even the most mad emperors also oversaw practical governance, building aqueducts, reforming laws, and strengthening borders. The contradiction is striking. How could rulers accused of lunacy also sustain one of history's greatest empires? Was their madness exaggerated for political reasons, or did the machinery of Rome function despite the instability at its heart? Power and the human mind. To place Rome's emperors into a broader human context, we must also think anthropologically. Power is not just a political tool, it is a psychological experiment. Human evolution has always been shaped by hierarchy. From prehistoric tribes where leaders emerged based on strength or wisdom, to early agricultural societies ruled by chiefs and kings, the concentration of power has revealed both the heights and the depths of human behavior. Rome magnified this phenomenon to an extreme. In a world where emperors were worshipped as gods, where their commands could mean life or death, the human mind was stretched beyond its natural limits. The temptations of excess, paranoia about betrayal, and the crushing loneliness of absolute authority, these psychological forces twisted men into figures of terror. The madness of Rome's emperors, then, may not be unique at all. It may instead be the natural outcome of absolute power, a condition for which humanity, shaped by evolution in small tribes, was never designed. Historical significance. Why does this matter? Because Rome's emperors did not merely live in their own world, they shaped ours. The fall of the Roman Republic and the rise of imperial rule became a template for future monarchies, kingdoms, and even dictatorships. When we examine the darkest corners of Roman history, we are not indulging in scandal, we are peering into the roots of human governance itself. The ruins of Rome are not silent stones, they are mirrors. Each amphitheater, each triumphal arch, each cracked marble bust reflects our own capacity for glory and horror. The emperors of Rome remind us that human evolution is not just about bones and tools, it is also about the evolution of ideas, hierarchies, and the fragile psychology of power. The bridge to darkness. Now that we have set the stage, the shadows of individual emperors begin to emerge. Caligula, whose reign lasted less than 4 years, is remembered as a storm of cruelty and absurdity. Nero, whose name still echoes with fire, symbolizes the danger of unchecked vanity. Commodus, who fancied himself a living god, brought the empire to the brink of chaos. Each story is more than legend. Each is a case study in how human nature, when armed with absolute authority, can spiral into darkness. And so our journey continues. Beyond the grandeur of Rome lies its underworld, palaces filled with whispers of betrayal, banquets dripping with excess, and emperors whose twisted legacies still haunt our collective memory.
Caligula and Nero, the theater of madness. When Rome crowned Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, better known to history as Caligula, hopes were high. He was the beloved son of the popular general Germanicus, and the people celebrated his ascension as a return to glory. Yet, within a short span, optimism curdled into terror. Ancient sources tell us of a ruler who declared himself a living god, demanded worship, and delighted in humiliating the Senate. Caligula, power without limits. Caligula's reign, beginning in 37 CE, became infamous for acts that blurred the line between theater and tyranny. Suetonius recounts how he had bridges built between palaces just so he could walk above the common people, as if levitating like a god. Statues of himself were placed in temples, and he allegedly ordered sacrifices to his own divinity. Some accounts even claim he attempted to make his horse, Incitatus, a consul of Rome, though historians debate whether this was madness or a calculated insult to the Senate. Archaeology adds eerie layers to this narrative. Excavations of Caligula's pleasure barges at Lake Nemi,
reveal ships fitted with marble floors, mosaic tiles, and even advanced plumbing, floating palaces that spoke of unimaginable luxury. These relics suggest that the emperor's extravagance was not simply rumor, it was carved into reality. Yet beneath the spectacles lay a darker truth. Caligula's paranoia grew lethal. Senators and nobles accused of disloyalty were executed without trial, their estates seized. He reveled in public cruelty, forcing families to watch as their loved ones were killed. For the Roman people, the emperor was no longer a protector, but a predator. What drove him? Some modern scholars suggest epilepsy, others mental illness triggered by the stress of rule. But perhaps Caligula's behavior was the logical end of absolute power. When no one can say no, even the most absurd whim becomes law. Nero, Rome in flames. If Caligula embodied cruelty wrapped in mockery, Nero embodied vanity weaponized by fear. Ascending to power in 54 CE as a teenager, Nero seemed promising at first. Guided by the philosopher Seneca, he introduced reforms, reduced taxes, and supported the arts. But as the years passed, the darker side of his nature emerged. Nero craved performance. He was not content to rule. He wanted to be adored as an artist. He sang on stage, acted in plays, and forced senators to attend his endless recitals. Rome's elite watched in horror as the emperor transformed the empire into his personal theater. Then came the fire of 64 CE. Flames devoured 2/3 of the city. Ancient writers like Tacitus accuse Nero of indifference, claiming he sang of Troy's burning while Rome turned to ash. Whether or not this image is literal, Nero's response to the disaster sealed his reputation. He built his Domus Aurea, the Golden House, on land cleared by the flames, a palace glittering with gold leaf, rotating dining halls, and artificial lakes. Archaeologists walking its halls today feel the chilling weight of a ruler who turned tragedy into opportunity. But Nero's cruelty was not limited to architecture. To deflect blame for the fire, he targeted Christians, then a small, vulnerable sect, subjecting them to horrific executions. Some were burned alive as torches to light his gardens at night. These acts, described in ancient chronicles and hinted at in archaeological finds of mass graves, reveal an emperor who used terror as performance. Nero's paranoia rivaled Caligula's. He ordered the death of his own mother, Agrippina, who had once secured his throne. Senators, generals, even close allies fell victim to accusations of treason. The empire's political stability began to fracture, and whispers of rebellion grew louder. Power as theater. Caligula and Nero were not simply madmen in isolation. They were performers on the grandest stage of the ancient world. Their cruelty was not random, but theatrical. Each execution, each act of excess was a statement of absolute dominance. They ruled not just through laws and armies, but through fear, spectacle, and myth. For us today, their stories echo beyond scandal. They remind us how fragile human reason becomes when amplified by unchecked authority. Archaeology reveals not only the brutality of their reigns, but also the contradictions. The same Nero who butchered innocents also funded theaters and aqueducts. The same Caligula who mocked senators left behind engineering marvels. This is the paradox of Rome's emperors. Tyrants who were also patrons, lunatics who were also visionaries. Their reigns force us to ask, can humanity wield power without being consumed by it? Or does absolute rule inevitably corrode the human mind? The legacy of their shadows. When Caligula was assassinated by his own guards in 41 CE, Rome erupted in chaos. When Nero, abandoned by allies, committed suicide in 68 CE, the empire plunged into civil war. Their deaths revealed a truth that Rome itself could not ignore. When an emperor became too dangerous, the system itself would devour him. Yet their legacies endured. Plays, poems, and historical texts kept their stories alive, while ruins like the Domus Aurea stand as silent warnings. Even in modern culture, Caligula and Nero are synonyms for madness and tyranny. They remind us that the story of Rome is not just marble and glory, it is also blood and ash.
Commodus, Domitian, and the debate of madness. The fall of Nero marked a turning point. Rome staggered through civil war, then stabilized under the Flavian dynasty. But the empire had learned a dangerous truth. Emperors could be as destructive as they were divine. The pattern repeated again and again, each ruler leaving behind a unique scar on history. Among them, two figures stand out, Commodus and Domitian, emblems of both the fragility and resilience of Rome. Commodus, the gladiator emperor. When Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor celebrated as one of Rome's wisest rulers, passed the throne to his son Commodus in 180 CE, many hoped the golden age of Stoic wisdom would continue. But instead, the empire descended into one of its darkest chapters. Commodus styled himself as the reincarnation of Hercules. Statues depict him draped in a lion skin, holding a club, muscles exaggerated, gaze divine. Archaeologists have uncovered countless busts and inscriptions confirming his obsession with this image. To Commodus, he was not merely an emperor, he was a god made flesh. But his divine fantasies spilled into grotesque reality. Commodus abandoned the duties of governance, preferring instead to perform in the Colosseum. He fought as a gladiator, slaying animals weakened beforehand, or facing opponents who dared not resist. Roman citizens watched in disbelief as their emperor, once the supreme commander of legions, lowered himself into the dust of the arena. Yet this spectacle was not harmless entertainment. Commodus charged the city enormous sums for his appearances, draining the treasury. Senators, forced to applaud his every staged victory, seethed with humiliation. Fear and resentment swelled as his paranoia grew. Executions and purges became routine. Finally, in 192 CE, Commodus was assassinated by a conspiracy of senators and his own mistress. His death plunged Rome into another civil war, the year of the 5 emperors. For archaeologists, the ruins of the Colosseum whisper his legacy. Inscriptions scratched by spectators, gladiatorial relics, and the damaged statues of Hercules all tell of a ruler who blurred politics with theater, collapsing the dignity of Rome's throne into spectacle. Domitian, the emperor of fear. If Commodus represented hubris, Domitian embodied fear. The younger son of Emperor Vespasian, Domitian ruled from 81 to 96 CE. At first, he presented himself as a reformer, strengthening the economy, improving the army, and investing in monumental architecture. His reign produced enduring works such as the Arch of Titus and renovations to the Colosseum. But behind the marble, a darker story unfolded. Ancient writers like Suetonius and Tacitus portrayed Domitian as a paranoid tyrant. He was obsessed with treason, convinced that plots surrounded him. Informants flourished under his reign. Whispers could lead to execution. Senators lived under constant fear, knowing even a jest might cost them their lives. Archaeology supports part of this narrative. Excavations of Domitian's palace on the Palatine Hill reveal grand halls decorated with scenes of divine conquest, reinforcing his self-image as a godlike ruler.
Coins minted during his reign bear titles such as Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. This was not metaphor. Domitian demanded worship. But his tyranny was double-edged. While despised by the Senate, he remained popular among soldiers and common citizens. He increased army pay, staged grand spectacles, and ensured the grain supply. The contradiction raises questions. Was Domitian truly a monster, or was he demonized by aristocrats whose power he curtailed? His fate mirrored Caligula's and Commodus's. In 96 CE, court officials and guards assassinated him in his palace. His memory was condemned through damnatio memoriae, statues smashed, inscriptions erased. Still, fragments survive, pieced together by archaeologists, reminding us that memory, like power, is never fully erased. Madness or propaganda? At this point, we must confront a question. Were Rome's mad emperors truly insane, or victims of political propaganda? Historians today debate this vigorously. Ancient sources, Suetonius, Tacitus, Cassius Dio, were often senators or aligned with elite classes. They had every reason to vilify emperors who threatened their privileges. Perhaps Caligula did not intend to make his horse a consul, but rather mocked the Senate's impotence. Perhaps Domitian was less paranoid tyrant than efficient administrator whose autocracy angered the aristocracy. Archaeology complicates the narrative. While texts depict madness, artifacts reveal order. Aqueducts still carried water, roads expanded across Europe, and cities flourished. Even under emperors painted as lunatics, the machinery of Rome functioned. Could an empire have survived centuries if their rulers were truly deranged? Some scholars suggest a middle ground. The emperors may not have been mad in the clinical sense, but their behavior reflected the corrupting influence of absolute power. Rome's emperors were young, isolated, worshipped as gods, and constantly under threat of assassination. This psychological cocktail could warp even the sanest mind. The pattern of human nature. Viewed through the lens of anthropology, Rome's emperors reveal a timeless truth. Human beings evolved in small tribal groups where leaders could be challenged, removed, or replaced. Our brains are wired for checks and balances. When power concentrates in one figure, divorced from accountability, it magnifies traits like vanity, paranoia, and cruelty. This pattern is not confined to Rome. Archaeologists studying ancient civilizations, from Mesopotamian kings to Mayan lords, find similar cycles of excess, collapse, and reform. The story of Caligula, Nero, Commodus, and Domitian is not just Roman, it is human. Unanswered questions. Still, mysteries remain. Did Caligula suffer from a medical condition? Was Nero truly responsible for the fire, or a victim of rumor? Did Domitian's tyranny protect the empire from greater instability? The fragments of evidence, burnt layers in the archaeological record, graffiti in forgotten cities, coins scattered in the soil, whisper conflicting truths. Perhaps we will never know the full reality, but the shadows of these emperors remain instructive. They force us to confront the darkest corners of human ambition, to ask whether civilization's greatest achievements are always haunted by its most twisted rulers.
What Rome's emperors teach us about ourselves. When we look at the ruins of Rome, arches crumbling under ivy, aqueducts slicing across valleys, mosaics glimmering in forgotten villas, we are not just gazing at a lost civilization, we're looking into a mirror. The emperors of Rome, twisted and terrible as they were, reveal lessons about human nature that remain startlingly relevant. Power and the human brain. First, we must face a sobering truth. Our brains were not designed for empire. Human evolution shaped us over hundreds of thousands of years as hunters and gatherers in small groups. Leaders in these tribes could be questioned, challenged, or replaced. No single human carried the weight of millions. But when agriculture and cities rose, power concentrated into crowns, thrones, and eventually the laurel-wreathed emperors of Rome. Archaeology shows this leap clearly. Prehistoric humans left behind cave paintings and stone tools, artifacts of shared community life. Ancient Rome left behind sprawling palaces and monuments, symbols of power belonging to a single individual. The psychology of one person suddenly dictated the destiny of millions. This mismatch between our tribal wiring and imperial reality produced distortions, vanity, paranoia, cruelty, that we call madness. The lesson? We must always be wary of power concentrated in one place, whether in an emperor's hands or in modern institutions. The seduction of spectacle. Caligula's floating palaces, Nero's golden house, Commodus's gladiatorial games, these were not random excesses. They were spectacles, carefully staged to hypnotize the people. Archaeological sites like the Colosseum remind us that rulers maintained power not just with armies, but with performances. Do we not see echoes today? Stadiums filled with chanting crowds, leaders basking in the glow of adoration, media spectacles designed to distract from deeper crises. The Roman emperors remind us that spectacle can become a tool of control. Bread and circuses were not merely entertainment, they were psychological chains. The lesson? Question the shows presented to you. Ask what lies behind the curtain of spectacle. The fragility of legacy. Domitian demanded worship as Lord and God. Commodus styled himself as Hercules reborn. Yet their reigns ended in betrayal. Their statues smashed, their names cursed. Damnatio memoriae, the erasure of memory, was Rome's way of saying, power is fleeting. Archaeologists today recover these broken statues, piecing together fragments of erased faces. And in doing so, they reveal another truth. Even erased legacies endure in fragments, often reshaped by those who come after. We remember Caligula and Nero not as gods, but as warnings. The lesson? No matter how powerful, no human escapes history's judgment. What remains is not the illusion of divinity, but the truth of one's actions. Reflections on modern civilization. Rome's emperors may seem distant, but their shadows stretch into our present. Absolute rulers still rise. Political systems still wrestle with corruption, paranoia, and the seduction of spectacle. The anthropology of power has not changed, only the stage. Consider how nations today still build monumental architecture, still stage grand spectacles, still immortalize leaders on coins, posters, or digital screens. Archaeologists of the future may study our skyscrapers and media archives the way we study Rome's ruins. And they may ask, did we, like the Romans, allow our leaders to fall into madness? The lesson? History is not a distant story. It is a cycle, and cycles can repeat. The inner Rome. Finally, we must recognize that Rome is not just external. It lives within us. Each of us carries a fragment of the emperor's temptation, the desire to dominate, to be adored, to silence those who oppose us. These instincts are evolutionary remnants of survival, sharpened in tribal life, amplified in civilization. But we also carry another legacy: cooperation, empathy, the ability to share stories and build communities. Prehistoric humans survived ice ages not because of solitary rulers, but because of collective resilience. Rome teaches us the dangers of power, but prehistory reminds us of the strength of cooperation. So what do we learn from Rome's twisted emperors? That unchecked power warps the human mind, that spectacle can enslave as effectively as chains, that legacy is fragile and history judges more harshly than flatterers, that cooperation, not tyranny, is humanity's oldest survival strategy. Archaeology is not just about stones and bones, it is about lessons.
When we study Rome's emperors, we're not indulging in stories of madness for curiosity's sake. We're seeking warnings, insights, and reflections for our own civilization. Because one question haunts us still. If we faced the same temptations as Caligula, Nero, Commodus, or Domitian, would we do any better? Or would we too become twisted by the crown?
The story of Rome's emperors is not just a tale of marble palaces and bloody intrigues. It is a meditation on the human condition. Caligula, Nero, Commodus, Domitian, names etched into history not as heroes, but as warnings. They remind us that civilization's brilliance can be matched and sometimes eclipsed by its shadows. When we walk through the ruins of the Colosseum or the broken halls of Nero's Golden House, we are not just visiting tourist sites. We are entering the theater where human ambition met human fragility. Each cracked stone is a voice whispering, "This too shall fall." Rome's emperors believed themselves gods, yet they died like men, often betrayed, abandoned, or erased from memory. The paradox is clear. Those who claimed immortality were the most swiftly forgotten. But history is not silent. Archaeology brings back their fragments. Coins pressed with arrogant faces, graffiti mocking their reigns, shattered statues buried under centuries of dust. These artifacts are mirrors, forcing us to look not only at them, but at ourselves. What do we see? We see that power can intoxicate, that spectacle can blind, that fear can corrupt. Yet we also see resilience. The empire endured, the people survived, and humanity learned. Prehistoric humans once survived ice ages by clinging to community. Rome survived its emperors by clinging to its structures. Evolution teaches us that cooperation, not tyranny, is our most enduring strength. And so we arrive at the final question. Do we truly know everything about our past, or are we condemned to repeat it? Rome warns us that the line between glory and ruin is thin, drawn not in stone, but in human choice. If Caligula's madness, Nero's vanity, Commodus's hubris, and Domitian's paranoia were not merely flaws of individuals, but reflections of universal temptations, then the real question is not about Rome, it is about us. In our own societies, in our own leaders, and even within our own hearts, do we carry the seeds of empire's darkness? That question is yours to answer. If this journey into the darkest secrets of Rome's twisted emperors has opened your eyes, then join us as we continue to uncover humanity's hidden past. Like, subscribe, and share this video, and together let us walk further into the ruins, searching for the truths buried beneath time. The story does not end here. It never does. History waits in silence, daring us to listen.